Thank you very much, Tahir. It's a great opportunity for me to get to interact. I guess I was out at Pakistan Water Week in December. Time has flown by since then, but it's good to be back in touch. And we've been working on this social accounting matrix at the district level. This is the first one of these that I've done after many years, and it's quite exciting to get down to a low level of economic um, resolution compared to national models. So that's what we're going to do today. We want to thank the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK government for funding this. And I also need to thank Ikra, Akram, and Tahir for being on this journey with me and doing so much hard work over this long period of time. So let's see. All right. So this program is called the Water Resource Accountability in Pakistan, the RAP program. Has three components. One's at the federal level, which is to improve water governance in the Indus Basin to support the implementation of national policies, water and climate change. The second component, which is where we're working, is better use of water within Punjab and how it's shared across priority usage areas that support implementation of the Punjab Water Act. The third one is a dissemination of findings, capacity development, and things like that. Mostly what this work is about is a piece of what's going on at the second component. A little bit more detail on that is that there are a series of interventions that are in process in this project. And they include water accounting and water resources assessment, early drought warning systems, and crop insurance systems. These are at the federal level. The ones that we will be providing some support for will be the first intervention in Punjab, which is water accounting and productivity assessment in a pilot district. That pilot district is Okara. The other one is intervention 4, where the application of irrigation demand management to improve water productivity. Actually, we will be sort of looking at the economic consequences of different kinds of irrigation management systems and use of water and things like that. So what we're trying to do, first thing we're doing is constructing a social accounting matrix, which is a whole economy model. I'll give you a little more information about that in a few minutes. And it incorporates production activities, household expenditures, labor use, taxes, government, trade. So it's a whole economy at sort of an arbitrary level of disaggregation, depending on the area you're working in and what you're interested in. So the idea is it gives you this framework for understanding economic interactions within the district. From that, once we get that built, and we're well on our way, we're not quite there, but we're getting there, we have 3 activities, which is basically to do multiplier effects. So you bump exports of rice a little more out of the district. There's all kinds of multiplier effects that occur, and we tie those to water accounting or water use and water accounting balances. So we're going to do economic multiplier effects with some specific attention to their effects on both economics and water. Then we're going to, excuse me, irrigation water demand scenarios. Going to look to some extent on cropping patterns and the effects of climate change. I'm going to show you a little of that tonight. We will do a few things on technology, which probably won't get done until we are using the SAM directly. And then the drought communication and decision making. We have some tests where we can look at how drought changes the proportions of surface water and groundwater that are being used, and we hope to test that. Okara is a good pilot district. It's got a mixed cropping system, a lot of rice, a lot of maize, a lot of wheat, and a lot of potatoes. Very important to the district. There are also many small and medium enterprises that can facilitate water abstraction. They also, as you'll see in a minute, tie very closely into the agricultural system. Sorry. Okara's smaller size allows us to be more effective at addressing domestic water uses. We're not so interested in that in this particular activity, but it will be, it can be worked on later. Very importantly, though, there is an on-farm water management research station in Okara, and it's really the only one in the province. So this provides us some good reality checks by people that are very knowledgeable of what's going on, and that acts as a knowledge hub. And then finally, the climatic situation is quite interesting for many reasons here. So a little bit about Okara from what we've been able to dig up from what we're going to model is that if we look at the employment patterns in the economy, which we got from the HIAS survey, we find that agriculture is still dominant with 38% of the employment in it. And then construction, community, social and personal services, and manufacturing are all significant. I guess the next biggest one after agriculture is wholesale, retail, restaurant, and hotels. A lot of that ties back into agriculture as well. And you can kind of see that if you look over to the right. First, the number of firms, 94% of them are tied to agriculture. And if you look at them, they are the kinds of processing firms associated with the production of these major crops that are found in the district. So cold storage, my guess is that that's primarily for potatoes, and it's clearly there are a lot of them. Rice mills, obviously related to rice, agricultural implements on the input side. The only one that's a little funny is the prevalence of cotton, surgical cotton, and basically textile kinds of activities, even though the amount of cotton has dropped a lot. Flour mills, there are not so many of them, but I suspect they're big, and therefore they are processing a lot of the wheat into flour in those couple of mills. So of the total number of firms that we could identify in the district, a huge percentage are in agriculture, and they are very clearly tied to the basic production activities that we see. So then a little more about the agricultural landscape. Farm areas, almost 1 million acres. Cultivated area is 833,000. The vast majority of that, if you look at the little circle down below, the vast majority of that is irrigated land, with just insignificant amounts are unirrigated or in orchards only. If you look over to the right, you can see that the pattern of cropping is 35% is wheat, 35% or so is rice. Potatoes are 15%, sugarcane is 10%, and maize is 15%. Together, these basically add up to almost all of the cropped area in the district. And so very big concentration in wheat, potatoes, maize, and rice. And you can see at the far column the value in billions of rupees the largest one by our estimates using AMIS statistics is 56 billion rupees in potatoes, followed by maize at 38.5, and then rice and wheat are about the same at somewhat over 20 billion rupees each. So these are significant activities in the district, and are and they do comprise the bulk of the cropping agriculture. I think the main thing that's not tied in here is the use of maize in livestock production. But for the purposes of the water use, we see that this is really where an awful lot of it goes. And we can see that in this next one, that crop water requirements, of course, vary quite a bit. This is out of some work that I've done earlier in the Punjab development statistics. You get these crop water requirements. So this is consumptive use requirements. And the ones we really care about, wheat is moderate, and it's sort of about the same level of potatoes and maize. And then sugarcane is huge, and cotton is also big, but neither of these are very big in the district. So rice is obviously the major water user among the major crops in the district. These are just some added statistics in fertilizer use. Some where water is low use a lot of fertilizer, as in maize and potatoes. So there's a different set of constraints that operate there. The consumptive water use was calculated by taking these crop water requirements times the number of acres, and this gives us over 1 million acre feet in rice, followed by almost 300,000 in wheat. And then after that, the two big ones are both potatoes and sugarcane in terms of water use. And maize is up there, but not as nearly as big as the other ones. So this is a concentration of a lot of water use. We haven't really done the supply side yet to know what percentage of water, if we back this out to applied water use, what's the percentage of all water use that goes into these crops, but will happen soon. And you can see on the left that in Okara, the area irrigated by is by and large canal and tube well. Almost to 85% of the water irrigation sources are both canal and tube well, where that's different than what you see in Punjab more generally. All right, let's talk about the SAM a little bit. Generally, a social accounting matrix has columns and rows. It's a matrix. Those columns basically add up to expenditures of one form or another, and the rows are income. So expenditures must balance rows, must balance income. So that's one identity that sits in the SAM. And then there are some major categories where we need specific data. And the first one are these activities and commodities. These are the production activities. We call them production functions, but they're really fixed coefficient relationships between intermediate demand, value added, which is labor and capital and land, and then some taxes, and those become total expenditures. The other thing, so that builds up the production side, and we do this by basically using the total output, which is the column total, and then distributing it based on these proportions that we already know from previous SAMs or work that's done in PERI at the AMIS, and basically we can construct the production functions from that. Then the other big one is households, because that's the major demand side, which is the consumption by households. And So they basically buy from local production as well as from imports, which show up in the commodity columns. And those end up being expenditures. So this is a separate data set that gives us a picture, a comparative picture between supply on the activities and demand by the households. Well, that's not the only kinds of demands and uses there are. And government taxes, investment in the rest of the world, or exports, is also in there. Now, for our purposes, government is only the district government. Investment is going to be handled very simply as ratios of production that we already know. And the rest of the world then becomes kind of residuals to get this to balance. Now, so we have a data set that handles production. We have another data set that handles consumption. And then we have these linkages, the thing that I have not painted in, the linkages between production activities, which provide income in terms of payments to capital and labor that go into households, and also households then enterprises, businesses, and factors get transfers from government, they pay taxes. So there's this linkage between all of these that is handled by developing the factor and enterprises. And this allows us to compare the demand side and the supply side, and how do we get from one to the other. So that's a whirlwind tour of a social accounting matrix. We have basically the household data done and the production function data done. We're going to make some simple assumptions on the rest, and we should be off and running on that. So one more nicer subsidy or nicer perspective than what I did. We build production functions. Separately, we build household expenditure. Thirdly, and somewhat separately, but tied to the highest often, we get the labor payments by sector of where do they work and how much are they paid. Together, these three things allow us to begin to build the SAM. Then we get the taxes and investment and the government budgets as the last bit, and we balance the SAM, and we get so that the rows balance the columns. So there are, just to show you basically, we've calculated the household picture, and the way that it's done, which is to be consistent with a lot of the CGE work being done at IFPRI, is that you have rural quintiles based on total household expenditures or per capita household expenditures. And so the rural quintile 1 is the lowest fifth of on a per capita basis of expenditures in a given household. And then so these are equally sized categories. So in my view, these make sense. GMWH is flour, basically. And you can see that it does not grow very much when you go from the lowest quintile to the highest one in either urban or rural areas. It's a little different. Rice grows quite a bit. So rice is a different commodity than wheat. Not much change in potatoes, vegetables, fruit, milk. They all grow substantially with income in ways that seem logical. Meat is far less consumed in terms of expenditures than the other ones above it. Compared to milk, it's minuscule. Poultry grows quite a bit, but there's still not that much there. Sugar, SREF is sugar, and other crops are tend to grow some. So this picture of households to me makes sense. This is what we're going to use. This is for Okara. And so this is basically the picture that we get for Okara households. Now we have to multiply those out to get the total expenditures, because these are just the average expenditures per person in those categories. But so Then we've also done this labor employment. I showed it up above. I won't really show it again, but it shows the number of employees by different activities. And when we aggregate them up, they come up with a reasonable picture of an agriculturally dependent but somewhat diversifying economy, still not heavily oriented towards manufacturing. I think the thing behind all this is that we only have about 400 or so observations in Okara District from the highest. So we're doing some checking for certain things where it makes sense to check against what's done in broader Punjab or perhaps some related, more similar districts where we can get the picture. So far, what we've done, the things where it makes sense to make a comparison, it's looked pretty consistent with what we've seen broader in Punjab. But obviously, you get a different urban perspective when you get around Lahore and things like that. We also have calculated the labor payments, not only the numbers of workers, but the payments. There are three kinds of labor activities. One is the basically no education, primary and secondary. These are the average monthly salaries for rural and urban workers, which go up in what seems to make sense. Land holdings are, another an asset, another piece of value added. So we need to multiply the labor payments by the number of laborers, and that'll give us the totals and distribute them to the different sectors, which we basically know how to do. Okay, so if you look at this, we've built a lot of the data. We have not completely put together the social accounting matrix, but when we do put it together, which is days or a week or two off, not months, we will then use a standard multiplier analysis where you basically normalize the social accounting matrix, multiply it by E, which is an exogenous shock, and you get the effects on all the different sectors in the economy that are endogenous. We can also, I don't really want to go into this particularly, but it's a square matrix. We divide through by the column totals. That creates a normalized matrix, and then we can set it up, invert it so that we can do these multipliers. We can also, though, constrain sectors. And I think that's important because when you do this multiplier analysis, you get very big effects because everything is changes with some exogenous shock. If we constrain certain sectors, if manufacturing is not going to change when potato exports go up, then we can lock it down so it doesn't change, and then these become much more reasonable. So a second approach will be to do what's called a constrained multiplier analysis. These, as I said, the multiplier analysis here tends to give large values, and it is a fixed price. There's no supply limitations. It's just if the demand changes, the supply responds to meet it. And so you tend to get big direct and indirect effects. So a fixed price multiplier model, it's demand driven. The exogenous changes to demand are determined and supply responds to meet them. So there are no resource constraints. There are no relative price changes so that production moves from one sector to another in response to changing prices. So that's a real limitation on that, but it is something that makes the model much more amenable to lots of situations. So what we decided to do was we're going to do a CGE simulation, a series of them, and we're going to do that and look at the effects in Punjab, and then try to translate those effects um, into simulations we can do with the multiplier model for Okara. So that's what we're doing. So we shift to Punjab here for the last bit of the presentation. And so we need to run a model with resource constraints and where prices are endogenous, such as the CGE model. So the SAM gets fed into the CGE model, and it calculates, it sets up the economy to be in equilibrium in the first year. So then what you have to do to get it out of equilibrium is you change resource availability, you change technologies, or you change external prices, among other things. So you have a really different set of handles that affect the CGE model than what affects a multiplier model. So we use this model to show the effects of changing exports for crops in the face of fixed land and water and fixed technology. We also are going to show how, well, if we reduce water, or if we shift from tube well to from surface water to tube well water, and drop water availability, what are the effects on the economy? So that's kind of what we're trying to do here. I'm going to give you an example of what's going on in that, and you can see hopefully what happens. So first of all, in the first two columns, we look at percentage output change. So in other words, the growth in production. And I went back and I looked at the past 10 years in Okara from the AMIS database, and found that since 2011-12, wheat has dropped to by 3.7% per year. Rice has been growing at nearly 6%. Cotton dropped dramatically at 18% down to almost nothing. Sugarcane grew modestly. Maize and potatoes grew better. So through doing a set of subsidies, assumptions on international prices, technologies, the interest that I had was to try to get a continuation. The base run was a continuation of the growth that we've seen in Okara previously. And it worked out pretty well in most of the important cases, but wheat and cotton, it didn't make sense that they would continue to dramatically decline. So we just had them grow at kind of modest levels. The assumption on rice is almost exactly what's happened historically. Sugarcane's a little high, maize is a little low, and we don't have maize specified correctly. So we're going to, I think, we're going to have to find some ways to work around that. But potatoes works pretty well, and that's pretty close. And others, which includes pulses, fodder, fruits and vegetables, is also growing at pretty much what's historically been those. All right, so then that's output change. This is the base. This is, before changing anything that we might want to evaluate its impact on. We can look at water use and land use. Those are the next two blocks. And so water use starts with the base. That's simply, well, wheat is growing slowly and its productivity is going up. So its water use drops by 1.1% per year. Naturally, with high growth in rice, the growth in basmati and Erie rice is high in terms of the water use. Cotton releases a lot of water, and then there's small positive and negative effects in the remaining ones, except the other ones lose about 1.2 million acre feet. Well, there are all these shifts, and I think this is what we want to learn from this, is what shifts make a difference. Well, and the base is, I'll show you this in a minute, but In the base, we're already getting lots of shifts. So out of cotton, out of wheat in terms of water use, into rice, a little bit into potatoes, and those are the big ones. And out of cotton, I guess I said that. So about 3 million acre feet of new water is added in this base simulation over the 16 years, or by the end of the 16 years. 3 million acre feet more of water is being used in slightly different, sometimes substantially different commodities. When we get a really quite a bit different outcomes, this LFPHE is lower flows and precipitation and higher evaporation. So this is a hot and dry scenario. And so when we look at it, we find that instead of this big gain in rice water use, we get a drop. That seems to shift a little bit back to cotton, which had gone out, and it shifts back into these other products. Potatoes still gains. In fact, it does relatively better compared to other things. And so we get quite a different set of outcomes in the hot and dry scenario. On balance, there's still growth in water use, but it's about 500,000 acre feet less. Land use, I won't go into too much, but again, you're expanding land, and it tends to go out of wheat, and it goes out of cotton into rice, into potatoes, and into other. Okay, the shift is you actually get more land use because of the shift into different kinds of commodities when there's higher climate change, when it's a hot and dry climate, a little bit more than what you no, quite a bit more than what you see in the base run. So then, and I'm not going to go into this a whole lot, there's a high rice growth and climate outcomes. So in other words, we bumped up the rice exports from from Punjab by over 1%, and tried to see what happens. So this is what we're trying to do. Okay, so if rice goes up, what happens to water use? What happens to land use with and without climate change? I don't want to go into this because I'll show you there's one thing that I can, let's just do this. So then we, okay, so just look at the differences in the high rice versus base growth outcomes. And you can see that, not too surprisingly, the rice outcomes grew, the wheat and cotton declined. So in other words, growth rates, output growth was much higher in rice by design. Pretty much went down in everything. I think the thing that's really flagged here is that potatoes drops by a full percent. So if we go for rice, we may end up getting a loss in potato production, so it appears. And the others are fairly small. Cotton is not going to be much of a player in Okara. It is in general in Punjab, so there's much more activity there than we're likely to see. The differences in water is that overall water grows by about 250,000 acre feet in the high rice one relative to the base one. And basically it's because we're going out of basically it's because we're interestingly that the rice, basmati rice and Eri rice perform a little different. The water use still grows, but it grows at a lower rate in basmati, which actually relatively releases some water. This is kind of a complicated thing, but and then cotton demands some, wheat goes down some, and then the other actually drops quite a bit as well. So on balance, adding rice, the high rice growth adds water consumption as you'd expect, but maybe not as much as you'd expect. And the same thing in land, it does go down, which is what we saw happen between the bay. It drops, so we've been shifting with this rice simulation towards more water use, water intensive crops, away from land intensive. So it's been shifting out of land to some degree. So it's not a big amount. There's a lot of shifts within agriculture for different land use companies. Only say that we have lots of policies that we can analyze. This is a different paper, but we've looked at taxing rice and sugarcane, then taxing sugarcane, rice, and cotton. What happens if we tax fertilizer? What happens if we tax based on crop water requirements? And we get a whole story that we can work with. So we can, there's a lot of policy kinds of things that we should be able to do. How much we do on this particular iteration is not clear. So finally, what we want to do is finalize these CGE runs, and basically that's reducing water and land availability, shocking the other major crops, and then probably adding more economic effects to what I've shown here. So this will be done pretty quickly. There's nothing really holding us back on that. We need to finalize the SAM for Cara District within the next 2 weeks is our threat. We need to run the simulations drawn from the CGE, looking at growth and declines in crops. And we want to create a water accounting synthesis of each of these. So that we're always getting back to changes in water use across crops, and actually it'll ultimately go outside of agriculture. And we can do background analysis for policies and effects of drought, including the Punjab Water Act, where groundwater is considered a governmental resource. With that, I say thank you, and I look forward to any comments that you got. Thanks.